Welcome to Whole Health. We're happy you're here on this journey of exploration with us as we learn what it means to live a life dedicated to spiritual, mental, and physical health. Before we begin our program, we want to share a brief legal disclaimer. The information provided on this program, including any health-related advice or discussions, is for general informational purposes only and should not be considered a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always consult a qualified healthcare professional before making any decisions regarding your health. Now, let's turn it over to Pastor Jeremy, Dr. Kala Kleen, and Brittany Pfeifner for today's episode of Whole Health.
Hey, thanks for tuning in today. And listen, if this is your first time joining us, be sure to check out our website, wholehealthlive.com, where you can find out a lot more about us and also listen to previous episodes of Whole Health. My name's Jeremy Higgins. I'm the pastor here at Calvary Community Church in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. And for purposes of this episode, it may help to know that I'm a dad of 3 incredible young men. I'm joined, as always, by Dr. Kala. She's a chiropractor here locally and a longevity provider. She's also a mom of 2 great kids. And Brittany, who's a functional nutrition coach, also has 2 boys and a little girl. Now, I have to tell you, we're pretty excited to get into our discussion for the day. You see, today we're going to be talking about movement as medicine. Now, this isn't gym vanity. This is about stewardship. It's about making sure that we're taking care of the body that God has given us. You see, in Scripture, we're told to honor God with our bodies. That's 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verses 19 and 20. Highly encourage you guys to read the Bible, to know the Bible, to apply it to your lives. And it's clear really throughout the totality of Scripture that God gave us a body and we're to honor Him with it. You know, we're also told that God created man, then He placed man in the garden. We're talking about Eden, almost 6,000 years ago. And He placed man there to work in the garden and to keep it. Read Genesis chapter 2. Hopefully you'll find it fascinating. Now, as a dad of 3 young men, I care about being strong. I care about being available for my family. See, we believe when God calls us to honor our bodies, He's telling us to honor our body with everything that we do with it, everything that we put onto it, everything that we put into it. And that no doubt includes our food choices. We had a great conversation about a lot of that last week. Now, we also believe wholeheartedly that we're going to work with our bodies in a way to build it up, to ready it for, maybe some more difficult times.
Jeremy, so glad to be here today. Thanks for having us. Movement as medicine, for the episode is one of the easiest things as a chiropractor to talk about. A lot of times people assume as chiropractor, like, oh, you deal with bones. And it's like, well, what moves the bones and what attaches the bones? And it's a lot of, the muscles and ligaments. And one thing too, as I reflected preparing for this podcast is find me a better man-made machine than the human body. Mm-hmm. And God's perfect design, He didn't screw it up. And, metabolically, the more muscle mass that we have, it impacts every other aspect from our cardiovascular health to our cognitive health. When we look at disease in America today, over 80% of the expenditures in healthcare is related to metabolic disease. And metabolic disease has a lot to do with lack of skeletal muscle and an overabundance of fat and body fat and consumption. Wow. And it's multifactorial, from our foods to, it could be from the fuel source, but it also goes hand in hand with lack of movement. If you look at a kid, like a 2 or 3-year-old, and they can get in perfect squat and play on the ground with toys. And as you watch them stand up, you're like, that was done perfectly. That's how we're supposed to be doing it. And that's how the bodybuilders do it. But then we go and set kids in a classroom at 5 years old. And there's a phrase that sitting is the new smoking.
Wow.
And
that speaks volumes.
Yeah. And in fact, you can say sitting might actually have more consequences than smoking in general.
Sure.
Not that I'm not promoting smoking.
We're not advocating for cigarettes,
yes. One thing when it comes to bodies, consistent movement is the most powerful medicines for energy, blood sugar, bones, brain, and ultimately independence. The lack of skeletal muscle, the lack of proper mobility is what puts us in the nursing homes. The number one reason why women are admitted to the nursing homes is due to urinary incontinence, what ultimately is a pelvic floor dysfunction and a weakness, a skeletal muscle weakness. The leading, some of the things that we don't talk about is, osteoporosis and the likelihood if we suffer after the age of 65, if we suffer an osteoporotic fracture, 60 to 70% of that, if you suffer, an osteoporotic fracture, 60 to 7% of us, if we suffer after age 65, will pass away in the next 12 months as a result.
Wow.
And so then if you're in the 30 to 40% that survive, the quality of life drastically declines. And so it's one of those things.
And that's just because movement is limited.
Yeah. So if you suffer, like, let's say for like a hip, and what happens is then you get a hip replacement, but the degree of immobilization following that hip fracture. So you get then what happens as a byproduct of that hip fracture, skeletal muscle atrophy. So you're not as mobile because it hurts and you're in recovery. Really then accelerates cardiovascular disease, can really accelerate. A lot of times people will say so this actually happened to my great grandma. She was 93 years old and she walked 3 miles every day.
Wow.
And just sharper than a tack. And she had that osteoporotic fracture and in the hospital, and you would see the cognitive decline within weeks. And it was so rapid. And a lot of people do report that. And so, a lot of the times when people talk about changing their diet or getting movement back into their life, I often tease that it's like we're asking them to walk on water and part the Red Sea in the same day. That it's just so monumental because it's like, well, where do we start?
Right.
And people get overwhelmed with, well, where do I start? And it's like little small steps can actually make a really big impact when it comes to skeletal muscle mass.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that you're saying that it's very doable because we have people in all walks of life, right? They're listening to us. You have people with little kids, people who are older. So in this episode, we're going to talk about how we can make it doable for anyone at any age can start to take those small movements and see a difference.
I think just that in and of itself, anyone at any age. Sometimes as we age, we start to think that, well, I'm limited from doing this and so I shouldn't try it at all. We're kind of convincing ourselves that we should just slow down and die when instead we should be looking for ways to keep our bodies healthy, maybe just in a way we haven't done it before. So maybe we set the foundation a little bit. Why does muscle matter so much biblically and clinically?
Yeah, biblically, as you had mentioned earlier, we were called to work. Men were called to work the land, and work isn't always necessarily easy. As I think about it as a healthcare provider and as a Christian, as Christians, we're called to go and serve others and glorify God with our actions. And if we are sick and unwell or weak, we don't get to do that as effectively or as efficiently. Practically, muscle is your engine's body and support system. It burns fuel and it stabilizes our joints, it protects our back, and lets you do life without pain. We naturally start to lose meaningful muscle mass in our 30s unless we train to protect it and stabilize it. So again, though, if people are listening and they're like, okay, I haven't been doing anything, I want to get into it, just know week 1 builds upon week 2, builds upon week 3. And I have personally witnessed in the years of practice, somebody be so metabolically weak that they are healthier in their 60s and 70s than they were in their 40s.
Wow.
But it's small changes over time in that dedication and that commitment. But 2 to 3 sessions a week has been studied 2 to 3 sessions per week. So if we have somebody who's completely sedentary and doesn't do anything, if they do 2 weeks with at least 20 minutes of physical activity 3 times a week, and that could be something as simple as walking. It's just we need to know where they're at as their baseline and then build upon that baseline. One of the things that as a chiropractor, what I don't want is for people to start working out and then they hurt themselves. And usually that's why people don't want to do it, is because they don't want to hurt themselves. And I've always been the type to say I can argue in front of a board of orthopedic surgeons, squats and lunges done wrong is still better than sitting on the couch and eating bonbons. We just want that movement. I know a lot of times too, if people haven't ever worked out and then they go to the gym and they're sore, sometimes that soreness is an embracement of the growth.
Right.
And soreness is okay. And they call it like delayed onset muscle soreness. That's a byproduct of work. Sure. And that is okay. And we should really be more embracing it versus being afraid of it.
Right. When you work out, you tear the muscle down. That's going to hurt a little bit. But at the end of the day, you're better off for it. I think our spiritual walk acts very similarly. You have to put in the effort, and it's not always easy to do. And as you're seeking the Lord, as you're reading the word, as you're taking time in prayer, you're going to find things in your life that probably need to be set aside, and that might hurt a little bit. But when you do that, when you're very intentional and you set those things aside, you're going to grow because of it. And so I don't think it's that difficult to make the connection between the two. I can tell you that I've been working out for a good portion of my life. The older I get, the more difficult it is to maintain anything at all. And the more work you have to put in. And sometimes that's difficult because you think, well, I've already set the foundation. I've already done all of this. But again, it comes back to intentionality. And that's something that we all have to make the decision. How all in are we going to be? Not easy for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that you talked about how you just starting out, you can just do, a couple of sessions a week. Cause I feel like myself, I tend to have this all or nothing personality where I'm like, okay, if you decide like you've never done anything with your health or wellness, and you're like, I'm going to start working out, and you just hit the gym 5 days a week. And you're like, thinking you need to work out for hours every day. And then we either end up hurting ourselves or we get burnt out, right? It's just not sustainable because you're not used to that. So I think learning that small movements and changes do make a really big difference. So, your squats, walking. I like to do workouts with my kids. A lot of time, if you have little kids at home and you just do not have the time or resources to go to the gym, and you don't have, a whole gym at home, I can do push-ups with my kid on my back. All of a sudden, I just start the lightest one and go up. So I got 3 kids. I'm just progressive loading with my children, quality time and exercise. And it's teaching them about moving your body. There's a lot of stuff you can just do at your house if you're like, I don't have the resources for this. That just incorporates it. I'm sitting, my kiddos are playing Legos next to me, and I'm doing stretching because I'm generally not a super flexible person. So that's been my goal this year, is to be a lot more flexible. So just incorporating it into your everyday, no matter where you're at in your life, is really helpful. Like I know my mom, every night, her and her husband watch a show before bed, and she does her stretches then, and he has not worked out in many, many years. And she's roped them into doing this core exercise video on YouTube. It's like 10 minutes every night. And so just those small movements. And we know that a lot of times like low back pain is like core instability, right? And that was his main complaint. He started to do that, and now his back pain is getting a lot better just from 10 minutes every night when you would have just been sitting on the couch. So
right. When you're not doing anything anyway, you might as well insert something that's going to help you.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
In the Proverbs, chapter 31, it's an amazing chapter. The virtuous woman. I highly encourage everyone to just read through the Proverbs on a regular basis. In Proverbs 31:17, I'm going to read it to you out of the King James and then out of the Amplified, because I think it kind of tells a story there. It says, she girds her loins with strength and strengthens her arms. Now, the Amplified Bible does just that. It amplifies every word. It gets deeper into the Hebrew and into the Greek and helps to tell the story. I don't use it to teach from, but it's a great study tool. Now, that verse in the Amplified Bible says, she girds herself with strength, spiritual, mental, and physical fitness for her God-given tasks, and makes her arms strong and firm. So, she makes her arms strong, right? But it's to serve. It's not to show off. She's not standing in a mirror and flexing and doing all that. But it is to serve her husband, to serve her family, to serve her community. And so let's talk about the benefit of that, that strength, because she's clearly got some guns, I would say.
Yeah. What I love about the Bible sometimes is just that it's so crazy how now we have science to prove it in so many ways. There's been tons and tons of studies from a longevity standpoint on grip strength. So I think in modern day, women that are mothers, they are, from the car seats, right? When moms are carrying it, I love it when twins come in and moms have like a car seat on either arm. Right. But from a metabolic standpoint, a grip strength is actually a big predictor. And they did recently, patients that have the APOE4 gene, they're more likely, unfortunately, to develop Alzheimer's and early onset dementia. And what they have found is, even though that puts those patients at higher risk, if they work on grip strength and grip strength alone and increasing that, it actually slows down the progression or even Alzheimer's dementia even showing up directly correlated to skeletal muscle mass. So if there's any family history of early cognitive decline, patients don't necessarily need to know whether they have that gene or not. It doesn't matter. It's going to benefit you no matter what to be working on grip strength. So a lot of times patients will be like, okay, well, what does that mean? Well, you can buy a cheap handheld device on Amazon to really test at, to see where you're at for your baseline. But they call it like the farmer's carry at the gym, where you have weights on either side and just letting your arms hang, but being able to hold on. And again, it depends on your gender and it depends on your age, right? And if you're starting at a low baseline, 10 or 20 pounds to be able to carry for 2 to 3 minutes might be a lot for some person.
Sure.
Other people might need to start at 40, 50 pounds. It just really kind of depends. Another way for grip strength is just being able to do a hang, like a whole body weight. And I believe if you are the age of 40, you are supposed to be able to hang for 90 seconds of your total body weight. And so, Brittany, have you been working on that? Is that why you're smiling? Because that's the whole grip strength thing. We had to.
The goal is a pull-ups. You start with hangs, though.
Yeah. Right.
Wow. It's funny. We're just finishing up a move, and last night my youngest son found one of those old stress grips, and he sat there, and actually I was pretty impressed. He went on for a long time, but that's fascinating how important just something as simple as grip strength can be to health and longevity, even mental function. So when the Lord talks about the virtuous woman and her arm strength, and there's a lot more to it than well, she's just carrying water back and forth to the house or something like that.
Her arm strength has direct correlation to her cognitive strength, which then has direct correlation to her spiritual health and how she's able to serve.
And again, I love the way that the Amplified Bible laid it out. She girds herself with strength, spiritual, mental, and physical fitness for her God-given task, and makes her arms strong and firm. There's clearly a direction that she's going with it, and she knows the need that she's going to have, and so she's prepared for it. And preparation, I think, is key in pretty much every aspect of life. Let's talk a little bit about blood sugar, maybe shift gears a little bit. It's probably a big deal for a lot of folks in our audience. When you look at the news and all of the different issues with people's blood sugar today, it should be something that's on everybody's radar. So how does movement help with blood sugar?
Yeah, so muscle is, basically a glucose sponge. After meals, muscle is where most glucose gets used and stored. When you move, muscles act like that sponge, and you need less insulin. Your energy is steadier and your body protects itself long term. And it's one of the reasons why too, even just like the timing of when we eat, one of the things that is super helpful for patients to consider is that we don't want our patients eating before bedtime. So we say we want you to be done eating all of your calories for the day 2 to 3 hours before you want to lay your head in. It has to do with the timing of how that fuel, our energy, then is converted and stored. And so if we eat a lot of food right before bed or a lot of carbs and then we go to bed, or it might help influence what our late night snack might be,
right?
Because we really will then store it and preserve it versus burning it and using it as fuel for the day.
Yeah, and 2 ways that we can really help with this glucose sponge. It's pretty simple to just start if you haven't started anywhere. A 10-minute walk after dinner is fantastic. It blunts your blood sugar spike by up to 35%, which then can help with those late night cravings. So it makes that 2 to 3 hour window before bed and not eating a little bit easier. It can help improve sleep. Throw your family in there with the walk. You got quality family time. Overall, It's a win.
Second, I saw on your Instagram you and your husband with weighted vests out with all of the kids, and I felt lazy actually in that moment. I thought, what am I doing with my life right now?
Yeah, it looked nice and polished. It's just insanity. We're just there with our weights, and then I have a kid on one hip, so now instead of walking with 15 pounds, I'm walking with 40. And it's great, right? So it's a good quality time, moving your body, you feel better. When I do it, I notice I'm more patient for bedtime chaos. So
I think, Brittany, for you and I too, what's years ago, I can't remember who was telling us or saying this quote, to be the adult you want your children to become. And so nice. the mirroring. So when we think about, men and women our age with kids that are still at home, just like it's important for them to watch us reading the Bible and going to church and serving, that movement and that physical activity, because I've even seen stuff that if Taylor's working out, then Hudson and Abel are right there next to him, just doing that very mirroring. And so one of the things that's patients they'll do everything for their kid or for their animals before they take care of themselves. Right. It's just kind of in human nature. And so one of the things is for the listeners that have kids at home, do the movement for your kids' sake.
Yeah. And I tell Taylor that all the time. So that's one of the reasons we kind of have made a sort of work at a home gym situation. He loves a garage workout. So we'll be out there and the whole family will just we got 5-pound kettlebells for the little ones because they want to do it too. And they have their own little workout mats. And so we're creating these foundations, and Abel, my 6-year-old, will do a full workout. He is committed. Awesome. And so just seeing dad and when we eat our food, we always tell you need to eat your protein. You want to be big and strong and like dad. Well, this is also showing them you need to move your body. You need to,
Right.
be a good steward. And so, yeah, definitely setting the good examples is helpful. And then also it helps, like, we are very busy, so it doesn't take time away from family time then. So all doing it together is helpful.
And that's setting the standard. They see that as a norm. That's just the way that people do things. It's the way that life is lived. My wife Brooke and I, that's been our process with we've told people for years, we're not raising boys, we're raising men. We don't want them to see themselves in any other way but a man of God created in his image and for his glory. And so that means that, we've done everything we can to help train them up in spiritual ways and physical ways. Their mental health would be strong. And taking them to the gym. I used to spend a lot of time over at Hard Drive Mixed Martial Arts, and it's Hard Drive Performance Center now. And the kids would come down with me and the whole place would just line with mats. And eventually Devin got really involved there and trained there for years. Owen was involved for a while. Aiden, our youngest, is now over there training. They've all been involved in a lot of other sports, but they have that baseline where they just feel like in the morning they're supposed to get up, they're supposed to work out, they're supposed to expend energy. The standard that was set, I think, helps them to just live that life that they're supposed to live. Now, let's pause and wrap our minds around all of this. So we're supposed to eat, right? And we take in good nutritional foods. You want to add that conversation we had last week into that as well. Eat the right things at the right times. We move a little bit, and then we start to move some more. We're feeling steady, and then we're getting steadier. And you get to that point, I can do that. I can do it with my children. I can do it with my parents. We're not just talking about ministering to your kids this way. Sometimes as we age and our parents are aging, we come alongside of them and we see that they're now sedentary. And so how do we get up and take you for a walk? My dad was always so good at taking us all for walks and hikes when we were kids. They're in Arizona, and obviously we're here in Iowa. And so whenever we visit, always trying to, kind of pay that back, help them in those areas as well. So now let's take it a little bit further. You ever heard this? I hear it all the time. People are always talking about how tired they are. And, I have certainly some opinions on the subject, but folks aren't here to hear my opinions. I'd love to hear from you guys. Do you hear that? I'm so tired.
Yeah, I do, especially because most of my patients are moms, or
there you go.
younger people they're tired. They're not
It's
sleeping.
legitimate.
Yeah, it's legitimate tired. And so it's really sometimes it can just be hard to just get started when you're so tired. But I've found this myself where I'm like, I haven't slept in many years very well at all. But I started to go to Pilates classes, and I'm like, it was so hard to get up at 5:30 in the morning when I've been woke up 4 times throughout the night.
Right.
But I found when I go and I make that like commitment and that time, my energy throughout the day is so much better. So just the small step to just starting to move, you're going to notice less afternoon crashes. You're less likely to be dragging. All you have to do is just the more that you move, the more your body is better at making energy and using energy. So movement wakes up your mitochondria. So which is, I don't know if you remember back to high school biology, the powerhouse of the cell, right? So it's
the mitochondria.
Yes. So it's like if you like turn on a light switch, the more you move, the longer that light switch is on. And so that's the more energy that you have. And that translates to you showing up as who you want to be as a mom, as a spouse, as a friend. So just starting slow, like we've talked, that's kind of like my whole point of this whole thing is like start slow where you can, and you will see the impact over time.
And starting the right way. I know a lot of people that only seem to deal with, I'm so tired, by inserting caffeine.
Yes.
And listen, I like a good cup of coffee in the morning to get going as well. And in full transparency, I'll share this, but I share it as a cautionary tale. There was a time several years ago where, I fell into the energy drink craze.
Sure.
And there was a few of them that they kind of reminded me of some sodas that I had as a child. And, I hate to tell you that our oldest son, Devin, is now like, and maybe you guys could help me with that. He's all in on energy drinks. And I feel like I aided in that. And I've tried to encourage him. Like, I haven't had one in a couple of years now, and I just never will again. But I think we deal with, our lack of energy, how tired we are in all the wrong ways. And something that you just said struck just such a powerful chord with me, because I know it's hard to get up sometimes when you've had a long day the day before and you have kids waking you up all night. But when you do that and you're pushing through, your body's then now creating its own energy instead of trying to bring in some kind of outside source that's not necessarily going to give you sustainable energy. Boy, that's something that a lot of people, I think, need to learn today. What else can we add to that?
Yeah, I think when I ask patients to, take movement seriously, the hardness is kind of like just the stop gate. And so then we have to, investigate like, why is it hard? And we do know that scientifically doing things you don't want to do is actually like really helpful. And I think there's actually quite a few references in the Bible of hardship produces character.
Right. Amen. Iron sharpening iron, that's not two soft things coming together.
Yeah. And so I think sometimes we have to shift our mindset around like, why are we doing it? So I decided like a dummy to do a half marathon. And my son was like, Mom, why are you doing that? And he's like, do you even like running? I was like, I don't. And he's like, my husband asked me, he's like, well, do you ever get the runner's high? And I'm like, I don't at all. I'm running to
just gonna ask that, so.
I want to get to that point, but I haven't found, I guess, that sweet spot. But where, I would say the high comes from is the joy of being done and have done something hard. And,
nice.
That's been really helpful. And so I always try to do something, like once a year that's like, what is something that I don't want to do, and do it anyway, because I have a body, I have eyes to see, ears to hear. God gave me this body. I should just do it.
Right.
And so sometimes it's a little bit of the tough love. I think, Brittany's point of like the tired moms, like, okay, I can give a lot of grace to that. Like that fatigue is real, but sometimes people are so tired because of lack of skeletal muscle.
Right.
And the more you train and increase that depth of skeletal muscle, sometimes it can become an addiction because you're addicted to feeling good. And so then, it does help. Before I had kids, I was ignorant to think I would never let fitness go out of my routine.
Right.
And then God humbled me
Amen.
and gave me children and that tiredness. And all of a sudden it's like, what did we do with our time before kids and before all of this laundry of all these tiny socks?
Right. And where did half of them go?
Yeah. And so like, I remember there was like after my son was turning 2, that I'm like, man, I have let fitness and that dedication to that rhythm and that routine go. I need to get back into it. And so started joining a trainer. And then, my husband's like, why are you going to personal trainer? I'm like, because it holds me accountable to at least that rhythm. So then Tyler started joining me. So there was a little bit of that contagious energy of like, okay, if I'm working out, you might as well join with.
Camaraderie is huge.
Yeah. And, after a year, he's like, hey, I know we did this to, get in shape, stay in shape, but this is such a big part of like clearing out the cobwebs and just getting my day's intention set.
Nice.
Like from that rhythm. And so starting from anywhere is going to be for somebody's benefit. And I think having that mental of this is hard and it's going to hurt, knowing it's on purpose and it's for our benefit.
Amen. So energy deficiency, wake up, get after it, add some cardio, do some strength training. Again, eat right. There's a lot of foods that I think detract from proper energy, that provide all of the crash that so many people experience, but a lot of foods that will give us the opposite effect as well. Again, let's shift gears. What about brain fog and mood? And again, transparency. I dealt with both of these things and I've found a great deal of victory over them, but sometimes people have a really hard time finding that sweet spot. The brain fog is difficult and that affects our mood. Where do we go?
Yeah, so movement actually boosts the brain's like growth signals for like learning, memory, focus, supports your mood. In regards to like the memory and the focus, I homeschool my oldest, and I have found like if we're sitting there and we're learning our words and we're learning how to spell, right? We have a climbing wall in our basement. If I let him climb that, hop down, do a couple laps as he's yelling out the letters that he's like spelling to me, he will retain that information so much faster than if I make him. We have a little desk, we have a whole homeschool setup. We don't use it, but if I have him sit there and we're really trying to focus, it is so much harder for him to do because that movement helps so much with his mood. He is such a better listener and his focus. So those together. And then if you can move that outside, we do a school a lot outside because that sunlight helps regulate your serotonin, your vitamin D. Both are super helpful for mood. And so outdoors is kind of like a triple win. You get sunlight, fresh air, quality time with your family. But yeah, that movement is really, really great.
Well, and even for listeners that have a desk job, which is majority of people, if you can get a desk that goes from sit to stand, but even getting like wobble boards and just movement while you're working from a cognitive standpoint. But those wobble boards are challenging different muscles compared to when you're seated. We had a staff meeting and Nate, he was like, hey, go give me that grip strength. I want to see how strong I am, because we were just talking about it just casually. And so he was sitting down and he did the grip strength. They said, hey, stand up and redo it on your left and right. And he was 20 pounds stronger just from standing.
Wow.
And so
That's impressive.
Yeah. So from a muscle recruitment, sitting really just shuts a lot of that down mechanically. But when we stand up, that was more of, God's design is meant to move. He didn't want us sitting down.
That's amazing. Colossians 3:23, it says, whatever you do, do it heartily, or from the heart, as for the Lord, and that includes moving our bodies. It includes caring for our bodies. We're supposed to do it for the Lord, unto the Lord. And, I think that right heart also helps us to be intentional about doing it more on a regular basis. Now, Dr. Kala, you're always saying we're training for independence and real world life. Help us understand what that means.
Yeah. So when we talk about longevity, I know we've referenced this in previous podcasts. There's birth span, or, the lifespan, which is from birth to death. And then we have health span, which is from birth till the period of life that we become immobilized. We can't get we can't get in and out of a chair without pain. Basically our health really starts to decline. And they say on average that health span stops about 3 years after retirement. But when we think about that from a movement, mobility, independence, we want to start training in our 30s and 40s to be able to get on and off the ground unassisted and holding a 20 to 40 pound weight.
Wow.
And so with that, we do need strength, but we also need that mobility. And pain really slows people down, a lot. But when it comes to independence, from a structure standpoint, we care about the hips, the shoulders, and then the core. And so there's a phrase that I've heard before in the past: core stability, distal mobility. So being able to have shoulders open and hips open is really important. So a lot of times if we were to ask patients to do a squat, we can see form fall apart because they haven't been training for it.
Sure.
The great thing about the internet is that a lot of people have put a lot of free YouTube videos on proper hip mobility. But people can just start by doing seated, or having a chair and just doing, what's the word, Brittany? The seated chair. Just squats.
Oh, yeah.
Excuse me.
The box squats.
Yeah, just doing, box squats, and just to be able to get those hips to open up, because it's an unnatural motion if they haven't been, planning for it. And then we progress our patients to be able to get into a deep squat. And then we really start to mobilize them on, like, even just lying on your back with hip openers. We call them windshield wipers. Yeah. And then we go to a seated windshield wiper. And so it's kind of like you make a figure four with your legs on back and forth. And so sometimes patients, they'll say like, oh, it hurts the hip or it hurts the hip. But just practicing that week after week, I've seen significant gains among patients who actually just do the work. Stretching is boring. I actually hate stretching, but it is so vital.
Right.
We need to do it to be able to create that mobility. And the stronger you keep your core and the more mobile, you actually reduce your risk of falling in the first place. Even if you are osteoporotic, the likelihood of you suffering a fracture, if you have proper hip mobility, proper shoulder mobility, and good core stability, even with weaker bones, that likelihood of actually having an osteoporotic fracture and a concussion goes down pretty substantially.
Reason enough right there to get busy and do it, for sure. All right. So I need everybody to listen. These aren't vanity metrics, right? We're talking about life metrics here. These are the kinds of things that keeps, moms and dads on the floor with their kids, with their grandkids even, so that we're there to nurture them, to influence them, just even to be close to them. And these are all things that we should want to do, even more so as we age. They're things that I've more recently been working on, just trying to, it's that hip mobility and flexibility, things that when you don't stretch for a while, go away so fast. But no doubt important to work on. So let's talk a little bit about bone health. It's especially important for, postmenopausal women, but guys, this matters for us too.
It does. And oftentimes, again, conventional medicine doesn't have patient screening for osteoporosis, in my professional opinion, early enough. If we could, I would, in a perfect world, I would love for every male and female to have a DEXA scan at age 20, so we know where they're at age 20. And then again, around age 40.
Like a baseline, and then you're building on it.
Yeah, because I'll be honest, I think just nutritionally, when we look at even our pediatric population, the rates of which we're seeing childhood diabetes go through the roof, and even hypertension in some of these kids, and blood sugar issues, and childhood obesity. We know that metabolically their bones are not going to be strong enough compared to the counterparts that don't suffer from those metabolic disorders. And so age 20 would be an excellent point to get the baseline, because what we do in our 20s, it's kind of like if you start saving in your 20s versus if you start saving in your 30s and 40s, it's kind of like that sort of a bank account. Yeah. But women, especially because, in your 20s, you're in your childbearing years. And so you make humans, tiny, cute little humans, but guess where they get their nutrition? From your fuel or from your body. Wow. And a lot of times we won't see that manifest of maybe what children took and robbed from their moms until women are, 30s, 40s, 50s, and beyond. Perimenopause and menopause, we know at the time that women go through menopause, they have lost 1/3 of their total bone density, which is pretty substantial. But if we don't test them until they're age 65, that's really, in my opinion, it's too late. We can be doing things to either prevent that or to be more aware sooner. So, for the listeners, if you're, in that 40 to 50, you can ask your provider, especially if there's a family history, to order that DEXA. I know locally we're working with Mercy, where they will allow us to send patients for what's called a whole body composition. So we can get some of those metrics sooner without waiting until they are 65. Really, really important. One of the cheaper ways or more affordable ways that we have, and that patients can go no matter where they're listening, is if they go to the InBody.com website, and you can find a provider that has what's called a biometric scale. And this biometric scale, it won't tell us the bone density, but it'll tell us what your weight is, but it'll tell us a little bit more in depth of what you're made of. So how much skeletal muscle mass you have at the current time based on your frame. So on our reports that we hand our patients, we still include BMI, because oftentimes, I know when we first got the scale and I stood on the scale, Brittany's like, whoa, you weigh a lot.
Because I was like, for the difference in weight between me and you, I'm so much taller. You are so much more muscle.
And yeah, when I looked at her, I was not offended at all. I was like, I know I got a lot of muscle and my bones are dense.
There you go.
But my BMI puts me in the overweight and borderline obese category.
Actually, I got tested for BMI when Brooke and I were trying to adopt, and they turned us down because they said my BMI showed as obese.
Yeah.
And I was in the best shape of my life. You could see every strand of muscle in my body. And I thought, well, that's not correct.
So, right, it's a horrible biomarker. But what's helpful about the InBody is that we'll have people who unfortunately have beautiful BMIs, but they lack so much skeletal muscle. And if you lack skeletal muscle for your frame, we know that that's going to be directly correlated to your bone and your overall bone health.
That's pretty wild. So we need to stress our bones wisely, feed them well. We need to stand taller. What kinds of things aid in some of that?
Yeah, so every time you lift, jump, carry groceries, all those things, you're telling your bones to stay strong and to be dense. So all those daily movements are helpful for that. But that only works if you have the right building blocks for them. So you need to aim for enough protein a day. I know so many women have a really hard time getting enough protein in their diet. So a lot, you can utilize, collagen, protein shakes if you need to.
Sure.
Me, myself, I just will serve myself more of my protein than I actually want. So looking at okay, I'll just give myself a little extra, and just those small steps of help me to hit my 100 grams of protein a day. So you can, eggs, salmon, chicken, trying to get some cleaner sources. Like I said, protein shakes are great, but we don't want you drinking 4 protein shakes a day, and that's all the protein that you're getting. But then you need calcium as well. So yes, dairy has calcium, but leafy greens also do. So I know a lot of people who are dairy free worry about how to get calcium in their diet. There are other ways besides just milk. And then considering vitamin D3, K2, especially in Iowa, we don't have enough. Unless you live outside all of the time, you probably don't have enough vitamin D. Most of the labs that we run come back. I've had one come back high. All the rest of them are either low optimal or very low. Yeah. So across the board, generally people are needing more vitamin D in their diet. That's with the K2 is specifically going to help get the calcium into your bones.
Nice. So Let's give some clear kind of at home and also in clinic numbers so people can see the progress. What kinds of things for at home?
Yeah, so for at home, they can use what's called like the waist to height ratio. And we want your waist to be 1/2 of your height. So if you're a 5'6" female that's 66 inches, we want your waist to be below 33 inches. And the reason for that has to come from, again, we can find this information out on a very quick InBody. And there's many local gyms and healthcare offices that offer the InBody. We do it free for patients that are ongoing, but if they're listening and they want to, swing by our office between now and the end of the year, we're happy to do that for them. It's a 3-minute test. We would love for them to be fasted and first thing in the morning, so they can call and schedule. Ask for Brittany, because Brittany will tackle this. But what's nice about that is that there's a metric on there called like the visceral adipose number. And what's important is that you can have somebody who, again, has a very healthy BMI, but unfortunately they have too much body fat around their midsection, or more importantly, around the organs. And if we have fat around our small intestine, large intestine, liver, gallbladder, that actually has a lot of indication on our bone health, cardiovascular health, cognitive health, and certain types of cancers. So if they can do that, otherwise, I know Amazon, there's a bunch of knockoff biometric scales. We've seen them around $20. It's definitely not, we had one at home and I tested it compared to the InBody, and it's definitely not as accurate. However, if you compare apples to apples, so if somebody's starting to train at home, you can still get one of those $20 scales, and it's still helpful because you can still see gains. It's just not as accurate from my biased opinion on the InBody. The InBody has about like a 1% to 2% error rate in comparison to the gold standard, which is using the DEXA and the whole body composition. So
yeah, other things you can do besides like the waist to height ratio, 5 sit to stands. So from a chair, arms crossed, 5 reps. Your goal is less than 12 seconds. If it's greater than 15, that might mean you need to work on some leg strength or balance. But just picking one, waist to height, or the sit to stand, and retest it every month or two and celebrate your improvements. So when you see your waistline shrinking or your time from your sit to stand improving, that's just evidence that your metabolism and your strength, your longevity are all moving in the right direction.
I love that you said celebrate the improvements, because we always complain when things are going wrong, but I don't know that we celebrate enough when things are going the right way. So I love that. What if movement hurts? When we're moving, sometimes it hurts, especially for the older listeners. The older I get, the more it hurts. What then?
Yeah, and it's a hard question because of the individualization, right? Yep, some people have, that we know like a significant amount of arthritis, or we know that there's actually underlying actual tendon tears and tendinopathies. Typically, when it comes to an arthritic pain, the more you move it, it actually feels better. And I've witnessed time again that patients will say, "Oh, I've got arthritis in my knee. I've got the old Arthur, and so that's why I don't move it." But, being able to discern, is this an arthritis pain? And the more you move it, it feels better, versus, oh, we're going to celebrate that you have pain because you started working out and getting, that we want to celebrate those because that means good. You're getting more muscle, and that's okay. If people want to start taking movement a little bit more seriously, sometimes it's from a metabolic standpoint, one of the things they can do is creatine. And creatine not only helps with basically increasing the gas tank of your muscle cells from an energy standpoint, it really does help from a recovery standpoint. A lot of times too, if moving hurts, it could be, unfortunately, too much sugar in the diet. We start pulling the sugar, and sometimes it's the carbohydrates or like the gluten. I know sometimes gluten might seem like overwhelming to be able to pull it from the diet, but we see clinically a lot of times that actually is what's fueling pain on movement. And so when we remove those from our diet, the offset is, wow, why do my joints not hurt to the same degree? And so we'll see that. Yeah.
And it's kind of wild because like I've had 2 kiddos who've had to be dairy free. So I've never removed dairy completely from my life until I had to do that for them. And I used to always just have like tight shoulders and muscles. And I always just be like, oh, I just swear I carry my tension in my shoulders. I removed dairy and it went away.
Wow.
And so I had never put that correlation together that like, my muscle tightness is because of dairy in my diet. So that's why I love to run food intolerances, because yes, it could be gluten, it could be dairy. Everyone's so individualized that it's like, we can guess, and you can, take your time to like figure out, a couple weeks that taking the SARI diet, another couple weeks. But food intolerances are really great for just if you are starting this journey and you're like, something just doesn't feel right, and figure out what's
Perfect.
maybe
So
the root of that.
It's not about no pain. It's the right kind of effort and progression. And there's the old saying, no pain, no gain, but we have to be careful how far we take that too. So we feed and fuel the effort, right? We have a busy family, all kinds of, complications and blessings that go along with that. What does it look like to properly feed and fuel the effort in a busy family?
Yeah, so kind of like we talked about earlier, protein, getting enough protein on each meal, aiming for like 25 to 35 grams per meal. If you're a man who's a little bigger, my husband has to aim for more, but that's kind of a baseline if you're like around like 150 pounds. Sure. So that helps build and repair your muscle as well. So when you start working out, you need that for the repair. So, things are easy to add in. If you're having a hard time getting your protein, you can hard boil eggs if you can handle those as a snack. Greek yogurt, cottage cheese is all the rave. You can look up a million recipes on how to make whatever you can think of. Everything. You could use cottage cheese to make it. So that's great. And then also hydration is, I think, severely underappreciated. Everyone's just walking around dehydrated most of the time. So one way to really help that is adding in some electrolytes. So we like Element at our office, or it's salty. So some of my kids like it, some don't. So then we'll use Ultima powder electrolyte drink for kiddos. So they say drink to thirst, but sometimes we're just busy and we just don't even think about it. So just making sure you're getting in. At our office, we did a hydration challenge to see how much everyone could drink, and it was actually really helpful to keep me on top of it.
It's funny. I when I talk to people, because I try to drink at least a gallon of water a day, and I do use some of the hydration packets. I use Element sometimes. I know I get them from you guys, and sometimes there's days I can't do it. They are difficult at times, but. When you talk to people about hydration, I hydrate well. I have a friend that, always makes a joke. He lives close to you, actually. And all he does is drink coffee. I filter my water through my coffee. No, you need water too. So there are a lot of things that I think we can do. All of the proteins, hydrations. I love the creatine. I just recently started trying creatine for the first time, a liposomal version. Sure. And it's only been a week or so. So, I've started to notice a few things, but I've got some anticipation. I'm excited to see what happens. What else can we look for?
Sleep, part of that recovery time. And two, I find so many times, sedentary lifestyle, a lot of times patients also suffer from a sleep issue. So a lot of times when you start being more metabolically active, really putting skeletal muscle strain with doing hard work. So a lot of times too, I don't want to put too much emphasis on the cardio, especially as we age. Actually, the more cardio we do, it actually, especially for men, it actually hardens your arteries. And so when it comes to cardio, we like more of like the high intensity interval. But like our marathoners and endurance athletes, especially for men as they age, there's actually been more links to cardiovascular disease because of what it does to the arteries. And so across the board for both men and women, we see so much more benefit on less cardio and more emphasis on purely the strength. I know a lot of people love going on walks. And so what then we encourage, is more of like the weighted vest, which you can start anywhere from 8 to 12% of your body weight. I would say aim to start low as you go on. But as it pertains to sleep, it is very anabolic. And that's how we get so much more of the recovery from our brain to our skeletal muscle. But keeping a regular bedtime in a cool, dark room, studies show that sleeping in a room temperature of 64 to 68 degrees is the best. And so sometimes
I need you to repeat that to my wife.
Yeah.
'Cause I like it cold, and she's,
Yeah. Well, and then for her sake, Jeremy, you just need to get her more blankets so that you can sleep. You can sleep at this 64 to 68. But, when I encourage patients to lean into that, and for the ones that have the wearables, even like for the women that are like, no, I'm freezing. Right. I need a sauna a sauna mat to sleep next to my husband who wants like no sheets. We can still see it when that room temperature that they're breathing is in that 64 to 68.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. So clearly we believe anybody can improve at any age. I think the variable is starting today. The journey of 1,000 miles, it begins with a single step, and we've all got to get out there and take that step. So give us a starter plan. What's our first step? We get into, how do we best do that? Like a week by week.
Yeah. So week one, just start with that 10-minute post-dinner walk. That's a very easy, simple thing to start with. If you work on a desk or a job where you're not moving a lot, taking like little movement snacks. So like every 30 minutes or so, moving 2 to 3 minutes. If you're not able to walk where you're at, standing up, do a couple squats.
Sure.
People might think you're weird. It's okay.
That's all right.
Some calf raises, things like that. Like my husband is a police officer. He spends a lot of time in a vehicle.
Right.
And so for him, I tell him, I need you to get on that thing and do some calf raises, because they talk about you're sitting like that. So your calves are like, they call it like your second heart. So we need to get that blood pumping. So that's what his homework is to do. And he's roped his partner into doing it too. Nice. So they're just out there doing some calf raises, trying to stay healthy. But then also strength training. You can start with just 2 days a week. Doing just some at-home stuff, or if you're able to go to the gym, that's great. Make that time for yourself. But just the chair, sit to stands, wall push-ups. If we're starting from ground zero, wall push-ups are great. If you can't do a full push-up or even one on your knees, start where you can, and we'll kind of progress from there. Practice your hip hinges. So the stretching and the flexibility are huge. They're not super fun, but it does take time. I will say I did 3 months of Pilates classes, and I've never been someone who can touch my toes. I'm just not a very flexible person. At the end, I can put my hands on the ground. Wow. So, but it did not happen after the first month, or even the first second month. And so now I'm walking around every day and be like, look what I can do, because my husband is also not flexible. So, but it's something that I have to continue to work on so that I can maintain that, right? And so then into the week 2, keep your post-dinner walk. Just make that as a part of your good habit. If it starts to get cold, what we'll do is we'll just do laps around our couch in the basement and make it like, we'll turn on music with our kids and make it a dance party walk. Sure. Create chaos. But just ways to make it still manageable when we live in Iowa and it's cold.
You had to bring up cold in Iowa. All right. Around the corner here.
Other things that Kala had talked about, where it's like the farmer's carries. That's something that, like, if you don't have kettlebells at home, you can just grab anything. Dumbbells if you have them, but grocery bags, you can fill those up and just do it. What my kids will
gallons
like to grab.
Of water.
Yeah, gallons of water. My kids will grab a bunch of cans and throw them in a bag, and they'll walk around with those to make their own little ones. So kind of use what you have. You don't have to have a lot of money or a lot of time to make this doable.
All right, guys, I think it's time to start winding down for the day. We're basically out of time. Certainly, we care about movement because, well, the data says strength and mobility drive quality of life. And because the Bible calls us to steward the body that houses our souls. Listen, we weren't created for comfort. We were created for capacity. So start with that 1 10-minute walk tonight and see where that takes you. Listen, if you want a personalized plan or labs or maybe an assessment with one of these amazing ladies, my encouragement would be to reach out to them directly. You can call Back in Line Family Chiropractic and Wellness at 319-892-3363, or you can just email them at frontdesk@mybackinline.com, or just check out their website, mybackinline.com. Again, it's time to close down for the day. We're so blessed that you decided to tune in. Listen, if this was your first time joining us, go to our website, wholehealthlive.com, and check out some of our past episodes. We look forward to connecting again soon. Have a great day.
Thanks for joining us today on Whole Health. If you'd like to learn more about our program, have a question for our hosts, or want to find past episodes, just head to wholehealthlive.com.